let's get nice and comfy here because we're going to be here a while. I was on Facebook the other day just swamping around in the ether, and I stumbled across a homesteading group, and they were talking about rabbits. Well, they were saying stuff like, oh my gosh, my rabbits are dying in the middle of summer. I don't know how to get my bucks going again. They're shooting blanks. Just ain't working. Or their does are just not kindling. They just can't get them to have babies. I'm like, well, interesting. Just to make this clear, they're not raising the same kind of rabbits as me, so of course, I am definitely partial to it. And I'm just like, why don't you just get the rabbits that I have? So the original video that I was going to shoot was how to choose a breed of rabbits that's right for you. But I didn't want to do that video. Instead, I wanted to shoot a video about why I raised the rabbits that I have. So today, we're going to get into that. You must be here because you went out of the system and off the chemical drip of society. Because you're waking up and you're ready to rebuild your life of sovereignty and independence. Here at Rebel Off Grid, we like to have a little show and tell about how and why we did it, while digging into some shady stories about the food system. Today we're talking about how one of your backyard meat animals was revived from certain death. So why did I choose TAMUK rabbits over any other breed? Well, when I was looking for rabbits, it was because I needed something that was going to be heat tolerant. I live in Texas. It's hot and humid, and the weather here is just freaking unpredictable. I needed a rabbit that was going to be able to tolerate the summers. I didn't know at the time that rabbits don't tolerate heat very well. They also wouldn't breed through the summer. I thought that rabbits are just rabbits. That's fun. I quickly found out that I might want a heat tolerant rabbit. If there was such a magical rabbit that was heat tolerant enough that I could keep it outside in the middle of summer if it gets like 100 degrees, and they could even keep breeding through the summer, that's great. Are there any large meat rabbits that do that? Yeah, in fact, there's a interesting history to that, and I'm going to tell you just that today. The rabbits that I ended up choosing were the TAMUK rabbits. It's a rabbit that was developed at A&M in Texas. They were basically developed for heat tolerance. They're large meat rabbits that average about 10 pounds. You can get some up to 12, and some of them are 8. Just depends. And they were basically bred for their vitality, their fertility, and mothering skills. They have a lot of really good traits about them that we're going to talk about. The great thing about these rabbits is that they're going to keep breeding and raising their litters during some of the hardest conditions that a rabbit can even go through. And that's what really makes them stand out, because they are a European-derived breed of rabbit. Most of your meat rabbits in America are European-derived breeds. Just for context, we're going to jump back and we're going to talk about the different kinds of rabbits. If TAMUKs are so great, does that mean all the other rabbits suck? At least when we're talking about heat tolerance. Mostly yes. And here's why. As we said, most meat rabbit breeds here in America are derived from European breeds. And that means that they're going to be more tolerant of colder conditions, because Europe is a continent that is higher in latitude. As these rabbits were domesticated, they were basically conditioned for cooler places. So they are going to struggle with the heat. Most rabbits that developed in the Americas are things like jackrabbits and cottontails and different variations of those. Jackrabbits are technically hares, and they're not really the same thing as a rabbit. They're more like cousins, I guess. But regardless, between the jackrabbits and the cottontails and all the other related American breeds of rabbits and similar animals, they are a bit more gamey, leaner, smaller. There's also an inconsistent supply of them, because you may have a boom in population due to various things that are happening, but there's also potential health risks with wild rabbits, such as like tularemia. They can catch transmitted diseases from mosquitoes from other rabbits. There's also a thing called RHD, rabbit hemorrhagic disease, something like that. It kills them off, and they can spread it to your domestic rabbits too. Regardless, European-derived rabbits are going to struggle. They'll get stressed at about 75 degrees, and they can even start stroking out when it's above 80, 85. something like that. They're definitely going to go sterile. Before the 1950s, rabbits were normally bred for meat, fur, and self-sufficiency, but they were also used in things like lab testing. You're generally talking about something like the New Zealand White and also the New Zealand Red. These breeds were developed in the early 1900s. These are a commercial breed of rabbits. They were basically bred for their size, their fur, their fast growth. They're going to produce large litters. They were also desired for their high yield, and they're actually better at heat tolerance than most other breeds. So let's cover why the heat tolerance aspect is so important, because a rabbit's body works a bit different than ours does. Rabbits don't sweat effectively. They don't have a lot of sweat glands. So it's going to inhibit their ability to cool in like an evaporative type of way. They don't have the humidity setting that we get. Instead, they will dissipate heat through their ears. So the bigger their ears are, the more that they can flap that heat off, and it just radiates out their ears. What they have that we don't is insulation. Their fur acts as a source of trapping heat, which is effective for them in colder climates. But when you have thick fur, or in some cases wool, like Angora rabbits, you're gonna be hot. And on top of that, they have a really high metabolism that just kind of traps more internal heat. Other things that can affect them is high temperatures, humidity, lack of airflow, and this all interferes with their ability to release the heat from their bodies. So it becomes really important to keep your rabbits cool, or maybe have some kind of hybrid vigor that they've developed that keeps them from stroking out at 85 degrees. After the war ended and rabbits became less popular, I guess, their selective breeding split into two different kinds of lines. That was their utility line. It was basically for commercial meat and then homesteaders. And then you had the show lines, where they started breeding for standards such as their body type, the type of fur that they had, their body conformation, and stuff that the ARBA standards go by. So genetic selection and behavioral changes, along with the nutritionally complete pellet, artificially made these rabbits lose their desire and physical traits of foraging for food. Instead, rapid growth became the dominant trait, at least in the commercial lines of meat rabbits. In the wild, foraging is a slow and intensive process that expends a lot of energy to consume enough energy to keep going. But when you have unlimited pellets in a calorie-dense diet, which can include things like soybeans, corn, other kinds of grain, flour, wheat middlings, even molasses and vegetable oils, just to hold the stuff together, it creates for a rabbit that just naturally gets more lazy. And without all the extra movement, they are weakening over time, and their genetics are just selecting for fat, lazy rabbits that eat lots of pellet and convert it to meat very easily. There's basically no selective pressure to keep them foraging, and so they're losing that skill. The pellets are tasty, easy, and for people, way more convenient. Rabbits are starting to sound like Cornish cross. I'm going to ruin every livestock animal, and I might need to start hunting because, yeah, I might just end up on Meat Eater. Hang out with that guy. Okay, so we've got fat, lazy rabbits that can't take the heat. Next is their mothering skills. Mama rabbits are now bred for less fearfulness. If they're less nervous, they're easier to handle, and they make for better companions. These behavioral changes and genetic variations in the brain reduced instinctual mothering responses. So, bunch of bad moms, what you gonna do? So human interventions like putting in nesting boxes and then monitoring the litters created no selective pressure to maintain strong mothering skills. And so you get bad moms. Then you have this thing called placenta confusion. Has anybody ever heard of that? Your doe will sometimes eat her babies, or halfway munch them down at least. I just call it cannibalism. That's because she's in poor condition, she's not producing enough milk, she's stressed. Maybe she thinks her litter is unhealthy, or there's some kind of disturbance, there's predators in the area. Maybe she just don't like you. And for some reason, somebody said sometimes it's on accident. And I think that's where the placental confusion thing is like when they're eating their placenta, and maybe they just mistake a leg or a head as placenta. I don't know how that happens. You must have some tiny squishy babies. Either way, them eating their litter, sometimes even when they fall out of the nesting box, is them just trying to hide the litter from predators, and that is just part of their natural instincts that is not as easy to fade away. Unfortunately, when there's a lot of blood involved, it attracts fire ants. Don't ask me how I know that. Shitty moms in nature usually don't procreate as well, or at all. And if they're not reproducing, their shitty mom traits just die out. Natural selection. Okay, the last thing that was, I would say unintentionally, but it was kind of intentional to wear down was the genetic diversity. Way back in the day, when they first started domesticating rabbits, only a few wild rabbits were selected for captive breeding. That means there was a small gene pool. Selecting for fewer aesthetic features like a purely white rabbit or blue eyes or whatever it is, it just shrinks the gene pool even further. These breeds were not optimized for function. They were not optimized either for health or resilience or reliability. When you talk about breeding show standard rabbits, there's a lot of closed breeding systems, and they're inbreeding their rabbits. They may be inbreeding them after 3 or 4 generations, but sometimes they're not. And this creates an increased risk for disease and mutations when selecting for things that are exaggerated, like floppy ears, or dwarfed faces, or long hair, or naked rabbits. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, so we have fat and lazy, pretty psycho mom rabbits that can't take the heat. And all these consequences are breaking down the pathway for the perfect meat rabbit. At some point, rabbit production expanded to these southern areas of the United States. Along with that came the challenges to heat stress. As we said earlier, above 85 degrees-ish, your bucks may go sterile if they're not heat tolerant, and they could stay that way up to 90 days after the heat has passed. You also may run into issues with your does shutting down their productivity. They may have lower conception rates, they could miscarry, have stillbirths, or even have something called a pseudo-pregnancy, which is where they basically fake being pregnant. I need a baby daddy joke, hang on. She needs a baby daddy! We'll pay for everything. They could also just neglect their litters. Like we said, bad moms. She's the bad moms club. Unfortunately, heat stress can also affect the litter. So little baby rabbits, they're called kits. And the little kits would die because of the heat. They can't regulate their internal body temperature. They can get dehydrated and just, just die. The mother rabbits could also have a decreased supply of milk, and that lower production could also contribute to the kids starving or getting dehydrated and dying. A popular decision among rabbit raisers and commercial rabbitries was that they would just let the rabbits die or go sterile. It was just common practice. They would breed their rabbits through the summer, and sometimes the does would even die because it's extra hot being pregnant. So you got all that fur, all that extra baby making going on, and then you've also got the extra consumption. You got to eat more food. It's just a lot. It's really sad, but a lot of the rabbits, they would just die. They just let them die. And I think I read somewhere that up to like 40% of the litters would die during summer, and that was considered normal. I don't know if that's still true today, but that's pretty freaking wild. So all these issues, especially the heat tolerance, led to agricultural institutions and breeders creating a newer genetic stock. That is the Texas A&M University at Kingsville rabbit. The TAMUK rabbit was developed to meet the needs of homesteaders. They're a composite rabbit, and we will talk about what a composite rabbit means. A composite is different than a meat mutt, and I will argue with people on this on the internet, because TAMUK rabbits are not a meat mutt. They are their own breed, if that's what you want to call them. A composite is a bunch of different breeds that have been scientifically selected for specific traits to create a perfect crossbreed. A meat mutt is just a general term for any mixed rabbit that anybody can throw together in their backyard. With a meat mutt, there's no specific goal. With a composite, goals have been achieved. Those specific goals with the TAMUK were the heat tolerance, great mothering skills, amazing producers, big fat rabbits. Look at this thing. She's huge. They have hybrid vigor. They're great foragers. They have great fertility. They produce during summer. They're just really good rabbits. Super healthy, hardly ever have problems with them. And these ones have been through some crazy stress. And my bucks will breed through the summer if I let them. I like to give them a break. TAMUKs were bred for their amazing docile temperaments. They are really easy to handle. That's great for kids. If you have kids, it's so good. I love these rabbits. So to get a little bit of a backstory, we're gonna go ahead and tell you the history about how the TAMUKs were created in the first place. They were initially made to improve the commercial breeds. So back in the gap, when it was like the 1970s, 80s, a lot of the commercial meat rabbitries were, as we said, letting their animals die in the heat, and they were going sterile, and they were losing litters, and they were losing their breeders. So a guy named Dr. Stephen Luke Farr, I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but we're gonna say Dr. Luke Farr, in the 1980s saw a gap in the rabbit industry. Show rabbits were not being bred for production in southern climates. And the thing with that is if you wanted to get a New Zealand white as a meat breed animal, most likely if you're looking into good quality, the quality standards were actually those aesthetic standards that didn't meet what a good producing heat tolerant meat rabbit would need to be, at least in the southern US, because up in the colder climates, they didn't need the heat tolerance as much. So in the 1980s, the precursor to the TAMUK was invented. And the number one goal was basically to improve reproductive performance, maternal traits, and heat tolerance in the New Zealand whites. When the new and improved New Zealand whites were built, they were used by crossing commercial lines from Arkansas, Florida, and Louisiana, and selecting for things like good mothers, large litters, good milk producers, and their intention was to be used as commercial rabbit and for backyard meat. Dr. Luke Farr wanted to develop an animal that was true livestock, not just a cosmetic breed. And the traditional function of rabbits returned when TAMUKs came on the scene and became available to the public. They would actually let you come to the barn. You can't handle the animals until you've already paid for the animal. So that's like a downside, but at least you knew you were going to be getting good stock. I believe the rabbits were sold as like $35 for a rabbit and then $9 for a fryer. After the success of creating these new and improved breeds of New Zealand whites, he moved on to create the now composite rabbit. In the 1990s, he added in 7 more breeds to create some hybrid vigor. The project was supposed to improve heat tolerance, fertility, feed conversion, and genetic diversity. This would create a hardy and productive heat-tolerant rabbit comprised of those 7 extra breeds, which were the New Zealand Red, Californian, Siamese Satin, Dutch, Champagne d'Argent, Harlequin, and Havana. The combination of all these rabbits created the genetic pool for just about any color. And that's what makes these really cool for homesteading projects. You can teach genetics if you homeschool your kids, or even if you just wanted to teach it for fun, by breeding rabbits because they procreate super fast and you can start matching their genetics to predict what they are going to produce. Ultimately, the TAMUK rabbit was the perfect rabbit. It was selected for function, not aesthetics. Function was the priority. It is not a meat mutt, but it is a carefully curated composite. It was scientifically selected over decades to be the perfect backyard meat rabbit in the southern US. Now, the TAMUK rabbits were not the only breeding projects that A&M did. In fact, there were quite a few of them. You have the All-Tex, which was a Flemish giant and Champagne d'Argent California cross. They would reach 10 to 20 pounds. They're discontinued as far as I know, but I think there's also maybe a few breeders that still breed them if you can get a hold of them. You might have to check with A&M. There was also the All-Tex cross. That's where they would take the All-Tex buck and cross it with a California New Zealand doe. Another favorite was when you cross an All-Tex with a New Zealand and it would make a fryer reach weight a week early. And then there's the naked one that we mentioned earlier, furless. I call it a naked rabbit though because it's a naked rabbit. Have you ever seen naked cats? They're so ugly. So what they did was they took a rare naked lock rabbit named Fuzz, and they loaned it to A&M to breed with some New Zealand white does. And their offspring outperformed all the other rabbits in heat tolerance. Think about it. If you got no fur, ain't got nothing trapping that thin. So I think if I was to run around naked, I'd probably be more comfortable than I am in this flannel shirt right now, that's for sure. But thank you, Nana, because even though these suckers are hot, I still wear them in the summer. They're supposed to keep the mosquitoes away, but since I have it rolled up, I got bit on my arm. Anyways, that's the TAMUK rabbit for you and why I chose them. I really like my TAMUK rabbits. They're super chill. I like to hang out with them. So I'll go and I'll just like crawl into their cage sometimes and just like prop up and just pet them and be like, you're so sweet, you're so nice, so pretty, so soft, I love you. And, you know, just chat to them. Because, I mean, they're animals. They like to socialize. Rabbits are like the third most popular breed of animal to be used as a pet in the United States. So after like cats and dogs, it's rabbits. Bet you didn't know that. So along with eating my rabbits, I do like to spend time with them. And some people have this disconnected idea that you can't love your livestock. I know like people like Joe Salatin, like they don't name any of their livestock because once you name it, you create an attachment to it. And I agree with that. Some of the animals that we've named, that we've eaten, my daughter's been like, and I hate this, that poor rabbit, when I'm slaughtering an animal, and I'm like, why you gotta make me feel bad about it? I'd rather just be grateful. I like to have a little bit of gratitude for the animal that I'm slaughtering and about to consume. It's on my dinner plate, because the whole point in doing this is to know where my food comes from and to enjoy the animal and their life while they're here. So yeah, I cuddle my rabbits before I eat them, even right before that last moment. My animals are loved, and it shows in the meat because it tastes amazing. There's nothing like raising your own meat. So if you don't do it yet and you're thinking about it, especially if you're thinking about finding some heat tolerant meat rabbits, get you some TAMUKs because they're great producers. They're super chill. I could feed them just any kind of forage. They're monsters. They will convert anything I give them without being super wasteful about it. But even if they do waste it, you can use their poo for your garden. I'm Jordan. Thanks for joining us over here at Rebel Off Grid. See you later. Forgot to mention, if you're curious about raising rabbits, visit Rebel Off Grid, and if you feel so inclined, buy me a cup of tea.